Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be making a forest generator. Let's get started. So I want to try something new. If you've got an idea for a tutorial that you'd like to see me make, please leave it in the comments below this video. I'm going to try and pick out on a regular basis tutorial ideas from the comments that people leave on the videos. So if you've got an idea for something you'd like me to do, leave it down below. I'll check it out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit A to select all and X to delete. I'm going to go Shift A mesh plane and I'll just scale this plane up. And I'm going to come over here. Actually, we're going to go into edit mode and I'm going to hit F3 and we're going to type subdivide. And then there's this little drop down here. I'm going to just bring that up and then I'm going to roll the number of cuts all the way up to 10. That's pretty good. And I'm going to do it again. So F3, click subdivide and roll it up to 10. That should give us enough to work with. So it's a really dense mesh. I'm just going to click on a vertex and I'm going to turn on proportional editing. And I'm going to hit G and Z and then roll my mouse wheel to expand that circle out. And you can see you get this nice fall off. And I'm just going to do this to kind of create some landscapes. I'll just do a bit of random little hills. Z, changing the size of my the wheel. You can also like hit A and come over here and grab random. And then you can like, oh sorry, not A, we just need to grab one. But if we expand the circle out with random on as we go up, it's going to randomize kind of the distance of everything. It'll make it a little bit more of a rocky terrain, a bit rougher. It's going to be very even though, so should be a little careful of doing this. I don't want to do too much, just a little bit to create some uneven terrain. There's a lot of other options in here too. Like we've got like constant and create little plateaus and stuff. Like that's kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and create a camera so I can see the scene through the camera view. So I'm going to jump into the camera and then I'm going to come over here to the View tab and click on this one, Lock Camera to View. I'll zoom out. Get a nice view. I'm going to come down to my camera tab, go to my viewport, turn up pathbar 2, and then I'm going to widen the lens a little bit to maybe a 25 or maybe a 35, something like that. And I'll push in and come down, up, and something like this. Cool. Untick lock camera to view and then zoom in. So just make my view bigger. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to expand this up and we're going to switch this over to geometry nodes. Now, what we're going to do is pretty simple. It's something I would have done with particles, but I've tested it in both particles and geometry nodes, and the performance actually seems a little bit better in geometry nodes, which I was surprised about. I expected particles to be better, but it turns out geometry nodes is pretty good. So, go figure. Here we go. Now, let's take this landscape, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier to it. And this is going to help smooth out the geo. I'm going to right click and shade smooth, I think is going to be a good idea. Now, if I go simple, I'm going to get much more like hard edge stuff. And I might do this first. I might have one level that's simple, although this is going to make it really dense if I do two. I was thinking we could do a second one that's not simple. That'll round out the hard edges. I mean, let's see, how bad is this performance? This is all right. Let's stick with this for now. So this double wave, so simple doesn't average out the shape. It just keeps the shape. So if it's a hard edge, it just adds in more subdivisions. So we've got a lot of subdivisions now, maybe too much. But you can see the difference between these two. It's kind of nice. Like this is like really nice rocky textural feel to the mesh. And then this one, of course, is rounding them out. So you can see all the little sharp sides disappearing when I use this. I mean, negligible, maybe this isn't necessary. Maybe we could set this one to viewport to 0. And so it only triggers when we render. That could be good. Let's keep it off for now. Remember that it's here and maybe we'll turn it on when it's time for a render. Okay, so let's come to geometry nodes with the plane selected. We're going to click new to create a new geometry node system. All right, so remember with the group input, what that is it's saying whatever the geometry nodes has been put on, so whatever piece of geo is holding this modifier, this is that object coming into the system, right? If I unplug this, you know, our system, our landscape is going to disappear because it's not plugged into the output. By plugging this into the output, we can keep it around. So we want to keep this, and then we want to generate stuff on top of it. So we're going to create some points across the surface of this mountain. So let's search for distribute points on faces. And we'll drop that node here. And I'm going to pipe this down here. So you can see we have this branching path system. So that way I can preserve this underlying landscape and then do this as an additional sort of system, right? It's supposed to just piping straight through, which will get rid of the landscape and just show us the points. And then I can close off the simulation with a join geometry node and pipe this one back in. So now we're going to get both, both on the same system. So I can scale this up. Let's go ahead and apply the scale of our landscape. We should probably do that. So I'm going to hit F3, apply scale, and I'll show you what that means if you're not clear. So if I go to the object properties for the plane, you can see our scale is 24.543, so it's really big. But if I apply the scale, watch what happens to those numbers. Boom. So it goes to 1, right? So now it's saying, no, this is actually the size. And it also changes the density of the points, because the way it works is basically it works on the 1 scale. So wherever it's at 1, that's the size of the object that the system applies to. Hope that makes sense. Okay, we're going to drag this up. We've got a lot of trees. These are all going to be trees. But we want to change that density. We want to kind of map it in a sort of irregular pattern, because trees they don't grow evenly across the surface like this. They grow in little patches and groups. So we're going to create some noise. Come over here and type in noise, grab a noise texture, and we're going to grab a color ramp, and we'll drop this here. And then what we'll take is we'll take the factor into the factor, and then we're going to take the color into the density. Now you might be confused by that. Like, why am I use color for what's going on there? Well, it's basically taking the input of color, which is 3 numbers like red, green, and blue. And in this particular case, it's coming from the factor of a noise texture, and the factor is just black and white. So it's really red, green, and blue, but they're all the same value because it's just black and white. There's different, not value, there's the same number, but it's a different value because it's a black and white, which is a grayscale value thing. Anyways, I'm getting myself confused. But basically, you can plug color into something like density, and it's going to take those numbers and kind of combine them all into one number and then use that to drive the density, if that makes sense. So when we have black, the number is going to be 0, so you're going to have no density. But when it's white, the number is going to be 1, so that'll be a density of 1 in those spots. So I'm going to take my scale down. I'm going to take it down to 1, really small, and then I'm going to drag these together. And we're going to just click this white pip, and I don't want 1, I want a higher value. Actually, I want a higher density. So I'm going to take the value. If you click on the little color swatch, we can take the value beyond 1. Even though the slider doesn't drag, we can still type in numbers. So I can type in a 5 here, and now I'm going to have a density of 5. I could try 10, see what that looks like. And now what we can do is we can find where's the point where we're going to see a nice cutoff. So I will take the scale down even further. You might be able to see the pattern of the noise kind of moving across the landscape. But if I just bring this around, you can see it's going to cut off the density in certain areas. So I have these blank regions now and these really filled regions. So I'm going to take this and I will turn the value up to 20, maybe 50, really get it dense in there. And now you can see that this noise drives where the trees go. And you can change the fall off and stuff. We can set this to ease, so it's a bit more of a gradual fall off. So you have like little areas with this where you have a few, but not many, and it kind of gradually ramps up into these more populated areas. All right, that's pretty cool. So let's start making some trees. So we're going to create a cone. So I'll create a cone. And I'm going to turn my segments, my vertices, all the way down to 3, and I'll keep side segments at 1, fill segments at 1, just make it really small. Really, not really dense, really light in terms of geo, because I want to pump a lot of these in, and I don't want to break my system. All right, so I'm going to get a instance on points. That's it. We're going to have the instance on points node. We'll drop it here in the system before the join geometry, and we'll take the cone mesh output and we'll put it into the instance input. And now we've got cones. They're more like pyramids, but meh. All right, now let's change the size of everything. We're going to create a bit of a random size, so we don't want these trees to all be the same. So I'm going to type in random value. I can also drop this density. This is probably a bit too much. I'll go to 20. Even that's a lot. Let's go to 10. Keep that for now. And I'll take this random value and I will plug it into the scale. And let's see, I want to make this a vector because I want to have 3 numbers for the X, Y, and Z scale. So I'll pop that in. And I never want it to go to 0. So I'm going to take all these and make them like 0.1. I might make all these 0.2, something like that. And then I might increase the Z a little bit. Next step, let's create a little bit of irregular geometry. So the thing with trees is they've got like, big bunches of leaves. And that creates a really interesting kind of noise pattern to look at when you're looking at a landscape. We might need to do this in rendered view so we can really get a sense of how the noise contributes, because with the size of these trees and the amount of noise, it's going to kind of depend on how it's all looking as one big image. So let's go ahead and switch over to rendered view and start getting some textures in here. So I'm going to turn on render view, and let's come over here to our render settings, turn on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections. And I am going to jump over to Polyhaven. Here it is, polyhaven.com. Check it out. All this stuff's free, really great to use, really awesome stuff. So I am going to grab two things. I'm going to grab an HDRI and a texture to use for the mountain landscape. I've liked this one here, this Aerial Rocks 02. So you can just click on that, and then you want to download the highest ones, the 8K. Once that downloads, you can append it into your scene. I'll show you how we're going to do that. And then the other thing I'm going to grab is over here on HDRIs. I'm going to grab an HDRI. So I'm going to go for a sunset. And I'll find one that looks good. Maybe this one, Wasteland Clouds, that looks pretty good. Industrial Sunset. I think I'll go for that one. And now we're going to switch over to the shader editor. And I'm going to switch to the world shader. So you just click this little drop down in the shader area. We're going to go to world. And I'll just hit A and full stop on my number keypad to zoom into wherever the nodes are, since they're out of view. And I'm going to grab an environment texture. And I'm going to open that, and I'm going to pick the one that I downloaded, Industrial Sunset, and I'll plug that into the color. We'll get this really nice Industrial Sunset. And let's go ahead and grab a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. And we plug the generated into the vector and the vector into the vector. Nothing will change because that's the default. It's already doing this like behind the scenes, but this allows us to dive in and control it. So now we can control how it's positioned in the rotation. Just going to turn this around. Let's get that sun in the view. It looks quite nice, maybe right there. And yeah, it looks really good. Okay, now let's add a bit of volume to our scene as well. So I'm going to grab a volume scatter node, plug that into the volume, and then we're going to take our density down to 0.01, and the anisotropy, we'll just drag that all the way up to like 0.9. And then I'm going to create a light. So I'm going to go Shift A, light, and I want a sunlight because I have one big bright sunlight. I might rotate it off to the side so I get the shadows, and then bring it around somewhere around here. Maybe that looks pretty good. I'll turn it up to like 10, give it a bit of an orangish color to kind of match the vibe of our HDRI. And open up shadows, and I'm going to turn on context shadows. You can see the difference there. We're getting a lot more shadows in our trees. So let's click on the plane, which is the landscape. We're going to go to the materials tab. I'm going to click new, and then I'm going to jump over from world. We're going to switch to object mode. Here's our material here, and then I'm going to go file, append, and I'm going to go to that that texture that I downloaded, which will download as a Blender file. And when you unzip it, you have a textures folder and then the actual Blender file. And I'm going to click append. Append is the terminology in Blender for importing, so it brings something into your scene. And this is all the different things within that scene file. I want to grab the collections folder. So I'm going to grab that collection and I'll append that in. It'll come with some stuff that I don't need. So I'm just going to get rid of those in a second. Go, delete that, delete the collection, grab the plane. But now I can swap the material out for aerial rocks. And there we go. I'm going to turn off this, the controller, the overlays, so I can see a really clean view. And then we want to change the scale. So I'm going to come over here. You see it's really designed well. It's built quite well, so very handy. And we're going to take the scale down. I'm just going to hold down Shift just to slow my, oh no, sorry, scale up. Take it right up, right up. Not so much that I can see the pattern of the texture, but enough that the landscape kind of looks right. I might increase the strength of the bump. And we need a material for our trees. All right, so we're going to create a new material just for the trees. So I'm going to switch back over to, we need to go over to geometry nodes. And right here for the instance on points bit, so the trees, before they get joined up with the original terrain. We need to use a set material node and drop this here. And we just need to create the material. So I can instance it on our plane. I can just click plus to create a new material, click the new button, call this one trees. Now that it exists, I can hit minus to take it off, but now it's in my scene and I can place this there. So now go back to the shader editor and we will need to select it. So I do actually need it on something. So I can click on it to get it to appear here. So there we go, trees. And we are going to, let's go ahead and just start off by giving ourselves a bit of a greenish color, dark green. And I want to use a couple of tones. So I'm going to grab a color ramp. And I like the one that we've got. So I'm just going to pick that and then I'll pick it again. And then what I'll do is I'll just create a couple of different pips and just spread them out like this. Just create some different variations. I'll plug this in. And what we'll do to help determine where they should go, I'll grab a noise texture and I'll drop that into the factor. And then we need to set a coordinate for this so that it's going to map kind of across the whole landscape. Right now what it's doing is taking the cone, the original first, actually is it? No, it would be doing across the whole thing. Just in case, I'm going to go Shift A, create an empty. And this empty will be what I use to place that material. So I can go over here and I grab a texture coordinate node. And I can use the object coordinate into the vector and then select that empty. And now wherever I drag that empty, it's going to move the noise pattern with it. So I can scale it up to kind of increase the size of that noise pattern. So you can see, hopefully you can see, you'll see it on your end if you're doing it along with me. But it's looking good. Okay, now one thing we can do to really create a lot more visual noise to kind of get the illusion of leaves is to use a really strong bump map and a little bit of specular. So let's do that next. We're going to come over here. We're going to grab a bump and drop it here. And we're going to grab another noise texture. And we'll plug the noise into the height. And we'll take the normal into the normal. What we can do is we can turn up the specular. And that'll create these little glints across everything. We can turn the roughness down as well. That's not going to look as good, actually. I think the specular is actually looking nicer when it's lower. Let's see. Roughness is good when it's a little high as well. There, but you can see how it creates a lot of visual difference. Now I can use the object coordinate as well for this, just so it's not uniform across all of them. I want to make sure it stays really different. I'm going to increase the scale. You can see by playing with that scale, we get different shapes to these trees that actually help. Looks really nice. All right, I think this material is really successful so far. I think this is working really, really well. I feel like this landscape feels cohesive, and I feel like these trees are believable at this size and resolution. If you wanted to push it a little bit further, you could come into geometry nodes, and what you could do is you could add some noise to the shape of these trees here. We could also probably do some rotation. Let's add that. We'll need that. We'll do the rotation. So I'm going to set these to 0 and these to 0 as well. And I'll plug this into the rotation, and I just want to rotate on the Z. So I don't want to angle them off at all in this way or that. So I might turn this up to 5 or something, and this will just rotate them on the Z only in different random ways. I might make this -5 so it goes both ways. Oh yeah, I was talking about the noise. So if you took your cone, right, you could actually come in here and add a subdivide mesh node. You drop that in here, and then now that there's more mesh on this geo, we could come over and grab 3 nodes. We could grab the normal, you grab a vector math. This is like a recipe. So think about it this way. Don't worry about if you don't understand the math behind this, just think about this as a recipe you could repeat. You always get these nodes to do this effect. So I'm going to grab the normal, and I'm going to switch this to multiply. And I'll plug that in there. And then I want to get I'm going to grab a noise node. And I'll take the factor of the noise node and plug it in there. And then I want to take this and plug it into a set position node. Drop that here, plug this in here. And what this is going to do is this noise is going to start to distort the mesh of our trees. You can see they all puffed up a little bit. If I make sure I'm not locked to view, I can zoom in here and you can see the effect of this. If I mute this node, you can see that's what they're like before, and that's after. So they start to puff up. If I increase the subdivisions to like 3 or 4, you're going to see what's happening here. We're getting these little like noisy jags, and this like kind of holds up. Like this looks a bit like trees up close. So naturally, if I zoom out, it's really going to start to sell the effect. And that looks really good. I like how it fills out the density as well. They look a little too chunky now. So one other thing you can do to this recipe, take these 3 nodes, have another multiply node and drag it here at the end. And then you want to set it to 1 to keep it normal. And then you can, we can go, let's see, we can make it bigger or smaller. We can go negative as well. I might zoom in again. That was helpful viewing it like that. So if we go negative, it's going to invert the mesh, but I don't think that's going to look good. Just going to do that a little bit to kind of help make it work. All right, cool. I'll just mute this again. We'll compare the two. I think it's good. I feel like we could use a little bit more in the material. So if I go over to my shader editor, I like zooming in close like this. This is helpful. So I think I want to increase this noise so it's really high. So now it feels like those are actual leaves. I can zoom out, see how that looks. Okay. I also want to increase the number, like the size of my landscape. So I'm going to make a few more of these. I'm going to take this guy and Shift D to duplicate, and then grab it on the X and just do what I love to do, which is reuse an asset. Rotate on the Z a little bit, and let's move it off over to here maybe. Create some clouds. I want to do some clouds. Let's go Shift A, Mesh UV Sphere. Bring that up, scale it, and let's turn that back on. And then let's go for smooth proportional editing. And then let's just distort this shape. Right. And it's a bit wispy, which is cool. And then we can Shift A. We're going to create a, where is it? Volume, empty. And then with this volume, we just come over here to the wrench, and we're going to go mesh to volume, and then we're going to pick that sphere. There we go. And now we can take the sphere, come to the viewport, visibility, viewport display, and switch this from textured to bounds. And that way we can just see the volume. Let's come to materials, click new. That will create a new material for the volume. And because we did it on a volume, it should automatically, yep, it'll plug into the volume and not the surface. That's what you want. And now we can take the density, and what we can do is come over here and create a noise texture. Once again, good old noise texture. Color ramp. Drop this here and take this over into that and this into that. Now we've got a 0 value and a 1 value. So we can use this to create some actual noise in the density. Oh, sorry, not the color. I want this in the density. That's what we want. And I'm going to come over to my render settings and come under volumetrics, and I'm going to turn on volumetric shadows. Now we can get shadows in our volume here. Just play with that. And then I can grab the sphere, and now I can place it wherever I want. Take this top level density off of 1, maybe, so it's never fully there. Key is always grab the sphere to move it around. That's what's gonna get it up. Maybe it's the color. That's a lot better. Well, I hope you found this really enjoyable and you learned a few cool things. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to the channel. That goes a long way to helping other people discover this video, along with leaving a comment. If you just leave a comment, even anything, just like one word like thanks or awesome or I hated it or that was the worst tutorial ever, anything like that, really helps spread the video on YouTube. Don't forget, you can get this project file if you join on Patreon at the 2nd tier and up this month or next month. Okay, they go through a rotating basis, the project files. So you want to, if you see a project you like, join in the month that the video comes out. So yeah, thanks for the support. Thanks so much to everybody who's a Patreon supporter and everybody that supports through YouTube by clicking that join button. Thanks to all of you. Really appreciate you so much helping this channel keep going. And yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Until then, have a fantastic week. See ya.